introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Jan Bang. I am 61 years old. I now live just outside an anthroposophical care community in Norway, where I have lived inside for many years. Prior to that, I lived in kibbutz for 16 years as a member. And I mainly spend my time now writing about community. I edit the Norwegian language magazine for a network of 6 communities that deal with people who are mentally challenged. And I've written half a dozen books, 4 or 5 books about community and ecology, and I'm working on more books about that. In 1969, I went to Nottingham University to study, and in the first week of the university there was a fair of different university societies that put out what they did and trying to attract members. And on one of the stands I found a magazine called Commune's Journal. And my realization at the time was that this was a way of saying yes to an alternative culture rather than carrying on saying no to nuclear war and no to war and no to pollution. In other words, trying to have a positive response to the ills of the world rather than a negative response. It didn't mean that I wasn't against nuclear war and pollution, but to come up with a way of constructing a new kind of society. And even though I actually didn't join a community at that time, I was involved in communities and community things, and there is a whole culture around intentional community which involves, in the sequence that I did this, was alternative education, also known sometimes as libertarian education, organic farming and growing, which I was involved in, alternative technology, what used to be called alternative medicine then became known as complementary medicine, but that whole range of homeopathy and acupuncture and naturopath and all that stuff. And gradually through that I got involved in the whole range of alternative culture, and then as part of life's unfolding pageant I ended up on kibbutz for a while as a volunteer and found that, hey, this is an alternative culture which doesn't have all those organic ecological elements well developed, but it has the social elements really well developed. And it took years of trying to choose, like, the alternative stuff that I was then involved in England was so badly developed socially. I mean, most of it was, half a dozen freaks living in an old cranky house in the countryside, digging a few cabbages. And then you have the kibbutz movement, which then was an enormous alternative society with its own everything, including university, its own transport system and its own economy and its own medical system, and everything was there, educational system, the whole deal. And in those days, in the 70s and early 80s, Israel seemed a lot more peaceful and saner than Britain, where we lived actually equidistant between 3 nuclear bases, and cruise missiles were lurking behind every hedge. It didn't seem like a real safe place, and the troops out of Ireland movement was a serious thing. It didn't seem like England was the wonderful saviour of the world, mother of parliaments particularly, and Thatcher didn't help. And the miners' strikes, I was teaching in a mining town, I could see the what do you call it, the roadblocks and the burning tires and the violence. And Israel seemed like a viable alternative. And so I lived for 16 years in kibbutz and watched it gradually grow greener, but losing some of its collectivism. That's like biographical rather than how I got into it.